Hello my friends, it's spring. I am so excited it is here. I've been planting flowers and I am so excited that I bought a tree and it's coming in the mail. Today I want to share with you a list that I've compiled of movies, books, TV shows, and activities that you can do to romanticize the season to the fullest. It's the season of renewal, a time for picnics, flowers, a time to read your favorite book in your garden with a nice warm cup of tea. The taste of strawberries and honey, waking up to a house filled with the most beautiful sound of classical music. The magic of spring is undeniable, even for someone that is an autumn girl at heart. I just cannot help that warm feeling that I get when I see the trees begin to sprout their leaves and the flowers begin to bloom. This just makes me want to romanticize my life to the absolute fullest. So let's get started with the recommendations. I'm going to start with books first. So first book on my list is Never by Jessa Hastings. Never is a Peter Pan retelling that follows the story of Daphne, Wendy's granddaughter. Her entire life she's heard these stories about Peter Pan in Neverland, and when she turns 13 she's expecting him to show up at her window. But unfortunately he does not, like he did for the previous Starling Girls. Peter actually shows up to her window when she is 17, and by this time Peter Pan is a grown man. So Daphne and Peter go off to Neverland. While she is there, she ends up meeting Captain Hook's son, Jameson. From here, it follows the story of the love triangle between her, Jameson, and Peter Pan. This book is so incredibly whimsical and beautifully written. If you're wanting an experience and to be whisked away into the magical world that is Neverland, pick this up. I would recommend reading the original Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie first before reading this. If you've only seen the movie by Disney, you might not understand why Peter is the way that he is in this book. He's not as fun as he is depicted in those movies. And the original book also will tell you why he is the way that he is, because he's not so fun in that one either. But yes, like I said, this is beautifully whimsical. There's romance. It's so much fun. Pick it up this spring. I think you'll love it. The next book on my list is The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. This book is stunningly beautiful. It is so magical. It's got such rich descriptions. I cried so much when reading this book, but in a really good way because it is so deep and insightful, and it has such wonderful elements. What's really interesting about this book is that its main narrator is a fig tree. This tree is basically a witness to all of the happenings within the story. And the story goes back and forth between the characters of the novel and the tree's narration. It's set in the 1970s during the Civil War in Cyprus and Turkey. And it's about two lovers who are forbidden to be with one another because of their religious beliefs and their cultural differences. So it's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet story. This book is just perfect for the season because it is about letting go of old ways in order to grow. It shows you the similarities between people and their relationships to trees and how trees have to adapt to their surroundings in order to survive. This book will make you realize just how beautifully broken the world is, but how wonderful it is at the same time. It is heart-wrenchingly beautiful, and I highly, highly recommend that you read this. The next recommendation I have for you is The Blue Castle by L.M. Montgomery. Yes, that Ellen Montgomery that wrote The Most Wonderful series, Anne of Green Gables. And if you are a fan of hers, you will most likely really like this book. This is one of her only standalone adult novels she ever wrote, and it is absolutely magical. This is about 29-year-old Valency, and Valency lives with her very weird and mean family. She feels a sense of unbelonging within her family. She's unmarried at the age of 29, and her family kind of makes fun of her for this. So to escape her family's mean comments, she keeps her nose in books, until one day she discovers that she's terminally ill. She's only given 1 year to live, and after she receives this news, she decides she's going to live life to the fullest. She's going to be wild and free and not live by societal standards. This has wonderful romance in it that's kind of a slow burn. It's a very heartwarming story about self-discovery. We see Valency change her fate by being courageous, and it is just so inspiring. It'll remind you that you should be living your life every day to the fullest. This next book is one of my favorites. I feel like it is a little slept on in the cottagecore community because I don't hear about it that often. There's even a wonderful movie that was adapted in 2003, but in my opinion, I think the book is so much better. Unless you're a Henry Cavill fan, because he's in that movie and I don't think I need to say anything else about that. But this is I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. This book is based in the 1930s and follows a family living in genteel poverty in the English countryside in a dilapidated old castle. It follows a very charismatic 17-year-old named Cassandra who wants to be a writer just like her father. Her father ended up writing one novel that was successful, but then he couldn't really write anymore. But through this book, we see Cassandra start a journal to hone in her writing skills. Through this, she wants to capture the castle, as in capture the castle's essence through her writing. And she really does paint this beautiful portrait of how this castle is, her eccentric family, her sister, and the goings-on that are happening in this English countryside. It's so beautifully well written. I mean, the descriptions in this book will make you feel like you are there. The book begins in April, so it's perfect for spring. It kind of reminded me of Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen because it does follow her and her sister and their relationship, and it follows the romances that they end up having with these two men that come into their lives. Like I said, there's a movie. If you want to skip reading this, that's okay. You can watch the movie. I think it's on Peacock or something, but I would recommend reading the book first because it is just so much better. Next is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This is a fantasy Regency romance novel about a girl named Dora. As a child, Dora is cursed by a fairy and has half of her soul taken away. This results in her losing like half of her emotions, and this also kind of turns her into an oddball. What spurs the beginning of this story is that her cousin Vanessa, the one that saves her from the attack, is coming of age. So Vanessa, her mother, and Dora decide to go to London for the London season. So while there, Dora kind of has to keep her wits about her and has to help Vanessa find a husband. But through this, she ends up meeting a man. And this man reminds me a lot of Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice. This book reminded me so much of Pride and Prejudice when reading it, but with magic thrown in. And she's a little bit like Elizabeth Bennet too, because she's witty and very quick on her feet when she's bantering with this man. At first she doesn't like him, but then that's when the romance comes in. What's really interesting is that he is the only person that can save her from this curse that she was basically given when she was a child. So if you like Pride and Prejudice, but you also like fantasy, then pick this book up because I think you'll really like it. It has some historical elements to it, and it's not like Outlander where there are specific dates and times that it talks about. We know it takes place after the Napoleonic War. There are sicknesses that are going on that are being investigated. And anyway, it takes place during the Regency period and builds off of those elements from that time. If you're into historical fiction, if you're into fantasy, you will not regret picking this up. I think I read this within like maybe a week. I loved this book. It was such a fun read. Pick it up. You won't regret it. Okay, now the last book on my list is something you may have seen. It's a very popular book on Book Talk and here on YouTube. I finally read it not too long ago and I thought it was perfect for spring. This book is like a warm hug, and I'm sure you've heard that before, but it's so accurate. It is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is such a comforting and emotional, cozy read. The characters are just amazing. This is a fantasy novel about a group of magical children that live in an orphanage in the Cerulean Sea on an island. We follow the main protagonist, Linus Baker. He goes to the house in the Cerulean Sea to check on the welfare of these children and to make sure that they are okay, to make sure the orphanage is allowed to stay open. At first, Linus is very weary and afraid of these children and their gifts, but with an open mind, he starts to understand their perspective of having these gifts and why they have to live away from society in a world that does not understand them. This is such a wholesome story about the fear and uncertainty of growing up in a world that just does not understand you. And the island is full of plant life and flowers. There's a sprite that grows plants to excite the children and protect them. This story is just absolutely wonderful and whimsical, making it so perfect to read this season. Okay, so let's move on to TV shows. Many of these are historical period pieces, which for some reason those vibes just remind me of spring. So if you're into those, you will definitely love this list. The first recommendation I have for you when it comes to TV shows is The Buccaneers, and this is the new one on Apple TV+. This is a period drama set in the 1870s and follows 5 young American women, their friendships and their experiences in London high society as they deal with culture clashes while searching for husbands. We have Nan St. George as the main character who is involved in a love triangle between two childhood best friends, Guy and Theo, which is pretty enthralling. This is loosely adapted from the novel of the same name by Edith Wharton, and I say loosely because this story is told a little differently than the original, as the Apple TV show kind of modernized the story a little bit. The language used in the show is very modern. There's modern music that plays. If you are a period drama purist, this may not be for you, but if you enjoyed Bridgerton or soapy CW dramas like The Vampire Diaries or Gossip Girl, you're probably going to like this. It is a really fun watch. The costumes are beautiful, the characters are really fun, and it is just perfect for this season. If you have not jumped on the Emily in Paris bandwagon yet, then let this be your sign to do so now. This series on Netflix is brought to us from Darren Star, the same person that gave us Sex and the City, and follows our main character, Emily, a marketing executive from Chicago. She unexpectedly becomes a Paris transplant when she's hired to offer an American perspective for a French marketing firm. While in Paris, Emily navigates the marketing world while making new friends and falling in love. This show is such a fun watch because not only is it silly, it's very aesthetically pleasing. I mean, the fashion alone is a good enough reason to watch. And it is chock full of drama and romance. You might just become addicted. Plus, it takes place in Paris, and if you're wanting to feel those spring feelings, this definitely helps to achieve that. Next on my list is Howard's End from 2017. This TV miniseries is adapted from E.M. Forster's novel of the same name, set in the early 20th century, and is the story of two independent sisters, Helen and Margaret, who become drawn to the goings-on of the Wilcox family. This family own a very beautiful estate called Howard's End. When the lady of Howard's End passes away, things get a little convoluted when one of the sisters falls for Mr. Wilcox. This story deals with conflict or class distinctions and human relationships. It's a beautiful story full of drama and has a wonderful aesthetic for spring. This stars Matthew Macfadyen as Mr. Wilcox, and if you recognize him, he plays our Darcy on Pride and Prejudice from 2003. If you're a big fan of him, you will love this because he is just as charming in this as he is in that movie. I believe that you can watch this on Amazon Prime. Moving on to number 4 on my list. If you are a big fan of Bridgerton and you haven't seen Queen Charlotte yet, then what are you doing? This is a Bridgerton spin-off series on Netflix, and it follows the marriage and love story of Charlotte and King George III. And it tells about how she became the queen that she is in the Bridgerton series. It bounces back and forth between the years 1761, when she was a young woman navigating her marriage, and 1817, when she's grown into a royalty, trying to get her children to produce heirs. This show is absolutely stunning. It's full of drama and romance. It's even a bit heartbreaking. I love the Bridgerton series so much, but I think Queen Charlotte is probably at the top of the list as the Bridgerton series goes. I loved it so much more than the original series. If you're a huge fan of the Bridgerton series, you may have already seen this. If that's the case, maybe it's time for a rewatch. And if you haven't seen this or Bridgerton, then I highly suggest that you watch both, especially if you're into period dramas. It is so wonderfully romantic. Next on my list is Julia, based on the life of Julia Child. This takes place in the 1960s in Cambridge, Massachusetts, during the production of her television cooking show, The French Chef. This is such a charming series. It has such happy vibes, which are perfect for spring, and it tells the story so well of how Julia came into her fame. If you're someone that loves to cook and has such an appreciation for food, then you will love this show. Also, if you love that movie Julie and Julia, that and this series have almost identical vibes. When you watch this, I would highly suggest romanticizing it by popping open a nice bottle of wine, making a beautiful spring salad. That way you can kind of put yourself into the story. It has great spring vibes, and it'll just make you so happy while you're watching it. There are 2 seasons out now, making it perfect to binge watch, and you can find it on HBO. The last TV show I have for you on my list is from the creator of Downton Abbey, and this is The Gilded Age. Taking place in the 1880s, this story follows a young woman who's drawn to daily conflicts surrounding new money and old money families in New York City's social circle. It highlights certain historical events that take place, like the building of the Brooklyn Bridge, the opening of the Metropolitan Opera, and so much more. The story even features a few notable families of the time, like the Astors, Roosevelts, and the Vanderbilts. The wardrobe in the series is absolutely stunning, and I am always so mind blown when I'm reminded that so much of the US was still living in the Wild West during this exact same time of industrialization in New York City. Just seeing how far advanced advanced half of the US was at this time just blows my mind. And let me tell you, the drama that ensues in this story is taken to another level. The women are very catty, and there are frenemy type situations. It is so much fun to watch. The second season is far better than the first, but if you're a Downton Abbey lover like myself, you will love the first season just as much. Like I said, if you're into Downton Abbey and you haven't seen The Gilded Age, go give this one a watch. It's also on HBO. All right, let's move on to movies. First on my list is The Personal History of David Copperfield. This is a movie that has been adapted from the novel David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. It's a chronicle of the life of David Copperfield from his childhood to adulthood, and it features his adventures and the web of friends and enemies he makes along the way. So we see David as a boy growing up in the early Victorian era in England, who has fallen upon hard times, and as he grows up navigating life's tough situations, he begins to meet wonderful people that help him see life in this very eccentric way, trying to romanticize his outlook on his life, and as he grows older, all he longs for is to be recognized as the gentleman that he knows he is. It has a wonderful cast that consists of Dev Patel that plays David, Tilda Swinton, Hugh Laurie, Peter Capaldi, and more. This tale is a fantastic rags to riches story to watch in the spring because it is very optimistic. It has a bit of comedy sprinkled throughout and just all around good fun. If you are a fan of Charles Dickens and his stories, then definitely give this one to watch because it is a beautiful adaptation. Now I know I said most of these were period pieces, but this one is more of a fantasy. It came out quite a while ago, but it still holds such a special place in my heart, and that is Maleficent. Maleficent is the origin story of the evil witch from Sleeping Beauty, and how maybe she isn't as evil as the original story would have you believe. Taking place in an idyllic forest, we see a young fairy who meets a boy from a nearby kingdom, who ends up being the prince from that kingdom. And when the royal army threatens the land in which she inhabits, Maleficent tries to do everything she can to defend it. Throughout this battle, things take a turn when the young prince she's fallen for betrays her. This is when she begins to plot her revenge and starts to show how she became the evil witch that she is in Sleeping Beauty. This is another perfect movie for the spring season with a beautiful setting and a beautiful story. As many of you know, I am a huge fan of Audrey Hepburn. Many of her movies are just absolutely wonderful, Sabrina being my favorite movie of all time. But My Fair Lady is one of those that is perfect for this time of the year. In this musical, we have Eliza Doolittle, a flower girl with a thick Cockney accent, who begins taking speech lessons from Professor Henry Higgins. The professor approaches Eliza as he believes he can transform her thick accent into one that will help her to pass as a lady. As the speech lessons ensue, Henry begins to grow attached to her, and as she is courted by men she meets along the way, Eliza just can't shake the feeling that maybe she has feelings for him as well. There are events that take place that will remind you of spring and bring all of those good spring feelings to mind while you watch. If you want a good laugh this season, then give this a watch. Next one on my list, we all know it, we all love it, maybe some of you have forgotten about it, and that is The Secret Garden. And I'm not talking about that new one from 2020 with Colin Firth. That is a great one, and I might as well mention it here as well because it is beautiful. No. I am talking about the one from 1993 starring Maggie Smith. Yes, the classic 90s one. I'm sure I don't have to tell you about the story, but just in case you are unaware, I will give you a brief synopsis. The Secret Garden, adapted from the popular children's novel by Frances Hodgson Burnett, is about a young, recently orphaned girl that is sent to England after living in India all of her life. Once there, she begins to explore her new, seemingly isolated surroundings and its secrets. This is where she stumbles upon a garden. Now, the reason I am recommending the 1993 version over the more recent is because of the transition that the characters in the garden go through. At first, the movie is really haunting and dark, taking place in a damp, cold winter, and then as the story progresses, things begin to grow and the characters begin to change. Whereas the more recent version is more whimsical and fantastical from the start. Don't get me wrong, the newer version is beautifully shot and still a good movie. I would still recommend it, but the 1993 version just holds a very special place in my heart for its ethereal nature and how hauntingly beautiful it is. So if you haven't seen this one yet, I would highly recommend that you do, and then come back and tell me what you thought about it. Another movie on my list is Miss Peregrine's House for Peculiar Children. I got it. This is also adapted from a book by Ransom Riggs. This is a fantasy adventure film about a boy named Jake that discovers a magical place known as Miss Peregrine's School for Peculiar Children, where children are kept secret from the dangers within this magical world because each and every one of them has some sort of special power. And we learned that the reason Jake has discovered the school is because the children that reside there are being tracked by certain enemies that only Jake's power can save. The cast is wonderful and consists of Asa Butterfield, Ella Parnell, and Eva Green. It's got great spring vibes, but it's also dark. It is a must-watch for this season. The last movie on my list is from the early 2000s, and that is Notting Hill, starring Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts. Taking place in London, Hugh's character William resides and runs a bookstore in Notting Hill, and one day he runs into a very well-known actress, Anna Scott, who is Julia Roberts' character. And I mean, he quite literally runs into her, spilling coffee down her shirt. From there, he invites her into his flat to clean up, and a romance ensues. This is a complicated love story about a boy who falls in love with a girl and can't quite deal with the fame of being with her because she's an actress. But this ends up with a happy ever after. It is perfect for spring. Give it a watch if you have not seen it. It is a very good one. Okay, let's talk activities and other things to do to get in all of those really good spring feelings. Of course, we have spring cleaning, filling your home with flowers, going for a hike, or maybe flying a kite. Those things go without saying, and you should definitely do those things as well. But just in case you have no other plans and you need some suggestions, I've got you covered. So it's a rainy spring day. You're kind of sick of scrolling through social media, you're about finished with a book, but you're not ready to pick up a new one. This is when I would suggest that you play a cozy game. Now, I asked a few of you on Instagram if you wanted to see these, and a few of you said no. Overwhelmingly, there was a yes. But for those of you that did say no, this is mostly for you. I need you to have an open mind about this. There are so many games out there that are so good for the soul and have wonderful stories, and it is a great way to escape the real world other than a book or a movie. Trust me on this, you won't regret playing anything that I suggest to you. And I have suggestions for you that have to deal with the spring. For example, Hua. This is a stunning puzzle platforming game with no combat. It features a beautiful Studio Ghibli inspired artwork and has a relaxing soundtrack. The game is a breathtaking experience that symbolizes peace, growth, and nature, which make it absolutely perfect for spring. Or we have something like Behind the Frame. In this game, you play as an inspiring artist who is on the cusp of finishing their final submission piece to the New York Art Exhibit. You paint, sketch, and retouch your artwork through a series of puzzles to complete your masterpiece, all while uncovering the emotional backstory behind your final piece of art. This, like Hua, is also heavily inspired by Studio Ghibli film, and the relaxing and beautiful gameplay make it perfect to play in the spring when the flowers are blooming and everything is gaining its color again. And then we have a game like Animal Crossing New Horizons. If you are new to gaming altogether and haven't heard of Animal Crossings, then let me be the one to tell you that it is such a fun little game. It is so wholesome. It is perfect for all seasons, really, because the content changes per season, but it is especially great to play during the spring. In this game, you create your character, and your mission is to bring civilization to a deserted island. You get to decorate your home, forage, plant flowers, all while making friends with the cute little creatures that begin to move into your little town. This is a perfect game for anyone that doesn't have a huge chunk of time. You can play it for just a couple of minutes every day and make progress throughout your story, and it is such a fun time. It is really cute. Like I said, it is so wholesome, you won't regret playing it. And then lastly, we have something like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I have such wonderful memories playing this game. It is an open world RPG where you play as Link, a citizen of Hyrule with no memory of who or what he is. You set off to save Princess Zelda and end the destruction caused by the dark creature Calamity Ganon. Through this adventure, you spend time exploring, cooking, crafting, and solving puzzles. You will traverse a world filled with quaint villages and interesting characters, creatures of all shapes and sizes, and a land full of hidden secrets. When I tell you I have some of the most fond memories playing this game and other games, I really do mean that. I think that gaming has such a stigma attached to it because we think of gamer boys, but the games that are like these that I've mentioned are so wholesome, they're good for the heart, they're good for the soul. You won't regret playing any of them. If you do, then come back here and tell me that I was wrong, but I don't think that I am. So another activity on my list is to do a craft, such as gluing dried pressed flowers onto glass jars to make floral lanterns. You could paint a birdhouse, DIY some stepping stones for your garden, or paint some signs for your garden. Another really interesting craft that I've been seeing is to create a bird feeding wreath. Just pop down to your local craft store and pick up one of those grapevine wreaths, those really natural looking ones. Get some dried oranges, some dried apples, cranberries, dip pine cones in bird feed, and then just arrange them so beautifully on these wreaths. Put it on your door. That way you can benefit from this, your home can benefit from it, as well as the birds. Or if you're looking to do something a little more simple, there's this really neat trick to decorate pillar or taper candles with printed paper napkins. All you need is a few taper or pillar candles, beautiful printed paper napkins, parchment paper, and an iron. All you do is peel the thin layer of the printed paper from the napkin, and then you get the iron and parchment paper and you melt that print onto the candle. This is perfect to do on a rainy spring afternoon when you don't want to read, you don't want to scroll, and you want to find a way to decorate your home and work with your hands. Okay, so my next activity. If you struggle to visualize how you want your garden space or patio space to look each spring season, then I suggest creating a garden map with paints. I specifically use watercolor paints for this. It is a beautiful way to plan out where you want certain garden beds, patio furniture, and planters. If you're wanting to do a big renovation, like installing a fire pit or a greenhouse to your yard, this can also really help with that. Especially if you're going to have to shift garden beds around, you can really visualize how you want the space to look. It's a really fun way to ponder all of the possibilities, especially through the use of color. And if you're living in an apartment or a place that doesn't have a yard, that's okay. If you have a patio space, you can use this to your advantage while also taking down the dimensions of your patio and seeing where you want patio furniture or little elements to create that spring feeling. Put some planter pots in that space. It works so well and it is so much fun. You get to be creative and it's so beautiful in the end. The next activity is to visit a botanical garden, a butterfly garden, an arboretum, or really anywhere that just has an abundance of foliage, and do picnicking. Yes, I know this is on everyone's list, but I feel like we're told to do these things and we don't actually do them, so let this be your encouragement to actually pack yourself a picnic and go. Pack you and your significant other or a friend a couple of sandwiches, some sweets, your favorite snacks, a couple of sparkling beverages. Take one of your favorite novels and read it aloud to one another. Keep your phone down unless you want to document the day with photographs. That is definitely something that you could do. Just really try to soak in the moment. Try to soak in the day. Try to soak in the season. Spring comes but once a year and you need to enjoy it. And really the only reason I put this on my list is because, like I said, I feel like we are encouraged to do these things, but we don't actually do them. So let this be your 4th, 5th, 6th, 10th time somebody is telling you to actually go and do it. We need to be doing these things as much as possible, especially while the season is here, especially while the weather is nice. Now, this isn't really an activity, but it is something that you can do to create that romanticism in your life, to really bring in those spring vibes. And this is where you set up your mobile devices to go off every morning to play classical music. I've had the setup for a while now, where when I wake up and go into the kitchen to make myself a cup of coffee, there's just classical music already playing before I even wake up. It's just playing so softly. It encourages me to wake up, to take on the day. I love it so much. I highly encourage that you do the same. I have an Amazon Alexa for this, but if you have a Bluetooth speaker, you can just plug it in and keep it on, and then your phone should just automatically play through that. Like I said, I use an Amazon Alexa for this. I just open the app, I have it connected to my phone, I set a routine, type in the days and time I want it to go off. I can't tell you how lovely it is to get out of bed each morning and to hear this beautiful soft music playing. It perfectly romanticizes my days, and especially during the spring season. Okay, lastly, this is something that you've all heard, maybe you don't do it, but bake or cook seasonally. Take those ingredients that are just peak deliciousness during this time and make something that you would normally make. Make something that challenges you. I created some strawberry cinnamon rolls the other day, minus the cinnamon. They were just like strawberry buns, and they were so delicious. The strawberries were so sweet, and the sauce that I made to go with them was just Chef's kiss. It was so good. I'd never made them before. It was a challenge, but in the end, it ended up all right, and I loved it so much. So I highly encourage you to do this. There are so many ingredients out there where you can make the most delicious salad. So take that on, make something delicious, and really take it in for the springtime. And that is it. That is all I have for you today. For those of you that watched the entire video, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I had loads of fun making this for you, and I am looking so forward to showing you the next one very, very soon. I hope you're all taking care of yourselves and having the most joyous spring, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye, friends.